It's the final season as Oklahoma and Texas prepare for their last year as Big 12 members. And talking season, guys, has been a little awkward, to say the least, with one foot in the Big 12 and one foot in the SEC. Things are not necessarily the smoothest right now, but here to help us kind of break through all of this, we have Chip Brown from Horns 24/7 and Tom Green of the newly acquired Sooners Illustrated. And guys, we've got a lot to talk about when it comes to the transition to the SEC. You're, of course, in town for the SEC Media Days. But before we do that, let's rewind back to the Big 12 Media Days, where the Commissioner, Brent Yormark, had some interesting things to say about the move.
I continue to maintain that the choice Texas made wasn't a financial one, because we all know what Texas resources are like. I think theirs was more about affiliating with a group of schools that on a given Saturday, they would rather get beat by Alabama than they would Kansas State or Florida than Iowa State. Or, that I think was really what was driving the way they looked out down the road. And in Oklahoma's case, I'm not as convinced that that was the issue for them. I think they were more of what I would call the reluctant bride, that kind of felt like, wow, if we don't go, what happens to the Texas OU football game, basketball, all the things that we know from an OU and Texas standpoint are really important.
That was actually Tim Weiser, the deputy commissioner of the Big 12, but we listened to what he had to say about the move. I'll start with you, Chip. What do you think about what he said in terms of Texas's motivation for leaving?
Well, Tim Weiser is the former athletic director at Kansas State, and he was on a very Kansas State-friendly podcast when he made those comments. Yeah. I think he's misinformed. Texas officials have said to me they wanted to be on the biggest stage, no matter what happens in college realignment, wherever things are headed. They wanted to be at the big boy table with Oklahoma, their rival and co-founder of the Big 12. I mean, Texas Athletic Director DeLoss Dodds and Oklahoma Athletic Director Donnie Duncan formed the Big 12 back in 1996. They want to be together.
What do you think about the Oklahoma side of things?
Yeah, I think Chip really hit on it there.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, I think the exact term that Tim Weiser used was the reluctant bride. I think that's kind of miscategorized, of course. Oklahoma is one of the biggest brands in college football. Texas, one of its biggest rivals, like you said, co-founders of the Big 12. So to kind of make that jump together, but come to that conclusion kind of independently before joining forces there, it just made sense. And I know, Commissioner Greg Sankey, commented on that earlier this week too. Just said that Weiser's comments were completely, misclassified, really.
Yeah, that's exactly why we brought you guys in, to get some more perspective on that situation. But yeah, Greg Sankey, of course, echoing the sentiment of both of you. But that's what comes into the whole kind of awkwardness of this transition here. But as we look ahead to the upcoming season and everything that's happening surrounding these two programs, I want to touch on recruiting, because Texas and OU have been dominating Big 12 recruiting over the last decade plus. Now you enter the SEC, where recruiting is, of course, key when it comes to everything that happens in that conference. How have you seen maybe the changes and what's happening on the recruiting trail for Texas as they're now able to say, well, we're joining the SEC? Where has that impact been felt?
Well, the biggest is on the offensive line. I mean, Steve Sarkisian came in. He was hired to match wits with Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, but Sarkisian was telling people privately, I'm going to build this thing like an SEC team, and that means large human beings. So they've had, I think the 4 kids they signed in the latest recruiting class on the offensive line were all 330 pounds or larger, and some of them are much larger. And that's where I think they've changed their profile. And obviously with Steve Sarkisian, they're attracting top-end skill talent, quarterbacks, receivers. A.D. Mitchell transfers from Georgia to Texas after winning 2 straight national championships. So Steve Sarkisian is trying to build this Texas team in the mold of the 2019-2020 Alabama teams that he had, with Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, that kind of speed at receiver. And of course, they won the national championship in 2020. He's very confident. We'll see if all this success in recruiting translates to the field in 2023.
Have you noticed a change in what Venables is doing with Oklahoma recruiting as they now are getting very close to that transition to the SEC?
Yeah, of course, Oklahoma's already been recruiting at an incredibly high level. Venables' first year, they signed number 4 class in the country, number 8 transfer class coming in this last year. But I think that he kind of realizes that he knows that the SEC is a line of scrimmage league. Just because the battles that he had while he was at Clemson, facing some of those top SEC teams in the postseason, and he knows that Oklahoma needs to kind of bulk up there on the defensive front and along the offensive line. You just even look at their most recent transfer that they brought in, Dejon Terry, who started his career at Tennessee. Big guy, last week at a Big 12 Media Days, had Oklahoma players talking about, kind of blown away by just his size and, not wanting to go up against him in drills and practice because, he's a force up there. So if they can get some more guys in kind of that mold and reinforce that line of scrimmage, obviously they've already been able to recruit at a high level, but that'll get them more SEC ready moving forward.
Yeah, already been able to, as you said, recruit at a high level. Something that certainly helps that sell, though, is results in what happens on the field. OU looking to rebound from a 6-7 season last year. What are the keys to success in 2023 for the Sooners?
Well, I think it starts on the defensive side. That is Brent Venables' calling card throughout his career, and the defense just did not live up to those expectations in his first year. Obviously, it was a transition year for the program after Lincoln Riley left. And they just didn't have the depth that Venables thought that they needed to be successful, which is why you kind of saw them falter in the second half, the fourth quarter of some of those close games. They had 5 of their 7 losses were by 1 score. 5 of them, I think, or 4 of them decided in the final 2 minutes. And he admitted they just did not have enough competitive depth to be able to last through late in those games. But he feels a lot better about that now by what they've brought in the last 2 recruiting cycles, what they brought into the transfer portal. And I think that is really going to be the key to this team, kind of turning around and getting back to what people expect Oklahoma football to be.
As for Texas, expectations sky high as they are most years coming into the season. But how does this squad take a step forward from what they were able to accomplish last year?
Well, they've got experienced leadership at every position group. And on defense, they probably had the defensive Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year and linebacker Jalen Ford, even though he didn't win it last year. He's the preseason favorite to win it this year. They've got depth on the defensive line. They brought in Jalen Catalon, a missile at safety from Arkansas. If he can stay healthy, he's getting rave reviews from his teammates. They've got talent at corner. On offense, we've talked about that. The quarterback position, Quinn Ewers, everyone expecting him to make the year 2 jump in the Steve Sarkisian system, kind of like how Oklahoma defenders are expected to make that year 2 jump in Venables' system, and then when you look at the fact that they've got Xavier Worthy back with A.D. Mitchell, the big question mark obviously is at running back. Bijan Robinson, Roschon Johnson move on. I'm very high on Jonathan Brooks. I think he's waited his turn. He's spent 2 years behind Bijan Robinson. He's hungry, and I think he's the next 1,000-yard rusher for Texas. But they've got to put it all together. Steve Sarkisian, he stopped running the football in a couple games last year, where if he'd have just kept handing it to Bijan Robinson, they would have beaten Oklahoma State and been in the Big 12 title game last year. So he brought in Paul Christ as a special assistant. He brought in Joe DeCamillis, a 30-year veteran NFL special teams guy who's going to help him with game management. I think he's looked in the mirror and said, here's where my slip is showing. I'm going to try and fix it, and we'll see if he can get it done.
Yeah. You mentioned the quarterback position. Unique thing about these 2 squads, they both have 5-star quarterbacks coming in with varying levels of expectations as they hit the field. What does the role for Arch Manning look like in year 1 with Texas?
Yeah, he's fighting with Malik Murphy to be the backup to Quinn Ewers, and Malik Murphy has the advantage of being in his second year in Steve Sarkisian's system. And for those who saw the Texas spring game, Malik Murphy is every bit of 6'6" and can throw the ball 80 yards in the air, and threw it deep and had a beautiful touchdown pass in that game, and is kind of the forgotten man in this equation. I think Malik Murphy ends up being the backup quarterback, and Arch Manning gets to grow at his own pace, no pressure. They're not going to put him under that magnifying glass any sooner than they have to. So Arch Manning, to me, is competing really for 2024.
You hear the situation with Arch Manning, probably a different one for Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma. What do things look like for him as he steps into college football for the first time?
You know, I think it's kind of more of a similar situation to what Arch Manning is because of what Oklahoma's bringing back in Dillon Gabriel. You know, I think he's poised to be one of the top quarterbacks in the Big 12 this season if he can stay healthy. So they don't feel like they need to rush things with Jackson Arnold. They've obviously been very impressed with him. Brent Venables was singing his praises last week at Big 12 Media Days just with how unselfish he is and just the way the ball comes off his fingers when he throws it, just his IQ and just his awareness and understanding of situational football. So I think he's in a really good position to kind of sit back, no pressure. You know, this is Dillon Gabriel's team this year, an opportunity to learn from a veteran quarterback who's been around and kind of slowly prepare himself and ramp up for, you know, when they move to the SEC and they need him next year.
Yeah. Sounds like a great situation for the quarterbacks. Not as great, though, for the fans here who are dying to see these awesome quarterbacks, highly rated, hit the field. Sounds like we're going to have to wait a little bit for that. Okay, another interesting comparison between these two squads is Vegas feels pretty similar about the both of you. 9.5 is the total set for both Texas and Oklahoma. I'll start with you, Tom. What are you taking over under 9.5?
Whew.
Tough.
Vegas knows what it's talking about, it feels like, because, you know, the schedule is very favorable for Oklahoma this year, so 9 wins or 10 wins seems like it's very much in the discussion there. You know, obviously that you look at that Texas game on October 7th, that's the big one. But the tricky part is those last 2 weeks at BYU on November 18th, playing in Provo that time of year is not going to be easy. And then you have a quick turnaround with a short week against TCU on Black Friday, day after Thanksgiving. You know, if they can come out of that stretch at the end of the season, I like the over.
Okay.
But yeah, it's going to be tricky there between 9 and 10. But again, the schedule, you know, shakes out very favorably. They don't play Baylor, they don't play Kansas State, they don't play Texas Tech. You know, they avoid some of those top teams in the Big 12 this year, so it should work in their favor.
Okay, Chip, 9.5. What are you taking?
Yeah, I mean, Texas is playing K-State. They are playing Baylor. They are playing Texas Tech. And they're playing Alabama in Tuscaloosa on September 9th. So this is a tricky schedule, but if you win, if you can catch Alabama maybe with some uncertainty at quarterback, as Alabama breaks in 2 new coordinators and you win that game, wow, your confidence tank fills up. It would be similar to 2005 when they won the national championship and had to go to Ohio State in week 2 and pulled off the win in a thriller. But Steve Sarkisian's got to show he can win on the road, close out games consistently on the road. Last year, went to Texas Tech, you know, squandered a 14-point lead. Went to Oklahoma State, squandered a 14-point lead. The best game of the Steve Sarkisian era was their win at Kansas State, in my opinion, last year. The fans will say it was the 49-0 beating of OU in the biggest rout in the Red River, shootout. So, but that was OU without their quarterback Dillon Gabriel. So, if he can, take this show on the road and show that they can, close games out, watch out. I mean, this could be a special season for Texas. I'll take the over.
All right. I love it. Everyone's taking the over today. I appreciate it. A lot of confidence in the off season. That's what Talkin' Season is all about. Thank you both for coming and talking with me here. Make sure that you are reading the great work from both of these reporters. Check out Sooners Illustrated. They're brand new, but they're doing fantastic work. So make sure that you are heading to SoonersIllustrated.com for all things Oklahoma. And then you got Horns 24/7 for everything you could possibly want to know about the University of Texas.